There's some confusion coming out of Russia today on the government's stance on the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. A foreign ministry spokesman in Moscow says keeping Assad in power wasn't necessarily a matter of principle for Russia, but quickly tried to clear that statement up, saying it's up to the Syrian people to decide Bashar al-Assad's fate. Let's bring in the Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California, our guest this hour. He's the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. As you know, there were talks last week, multilateral talks with all sorts of countries, including Iran and Saudi Arabia, dealing with the future. Syria or Russia now calling for more talks next week in Moscow, bringing Syrian officials in there as well. Is there some sort of diplomatic end to this that you could see, Congressman, that would remove Bashar al-Assad from power despite the objections of Russia and Iran?
Well, that's certainly the hope, because I think as a practical matter, until Assad is gone, this civil war is going to churn on. There are just so many millions of Syrians who are never going to live under Bashar al-Assad again. So I think his removal is necessary to end this and necessary to put an end to ISIS. I don't think Russia is ready yet. I don't think Iran is ready yet. But we're already a month into this Russian military intervention, and we're not seeing a dramatic change on the battlefield yet. And I think the longer you see Russia and its resources being sucked in, and the same with Iran, the more they may start with favor on a transition away from Assad. But I don't think we're there yet.
We're hearing that U.S. and Russian aircraft successfully carried out what's being described as a communications test today to make sure that they avoid each other in these kinds of airstrikes and accidentally don't knock off one of their respective aircraft. What can you tell us about this?
Well, that's certainly in our interest and in the Russians' interest. We don't want to have a direct confrontation. It's already having this proxy confrontation in Syria. But to have an American plane shot down, or a Russian one, or to have a plane hit by a cruise missile because we have no idea what the Russians are doing, that would set off potentially a very dangerous chain of events. So I think the communication is certainly an improvement from the beginning of the Russian military involvement, where basically they gave us about an hour's notice and said, we're just going to do what we're going to do. We are still not prepared to completely deconflict, because we're not about to tell the Russians where the moderate opposition are, because that turns out to be target number one for the Russian Air Force. But nonetheless, I think the deconfliction is improving.
The President, as you know, last week authorized the deployment of fewer than 50 special operations forces on the ground in Syria. So does that really change this mission? Is it too little, too late? What's your assessment?
Well, my assessment is that the administration needs to do something, because the battlefield now has been static for a long period of time, certainly static in Iraq, and apart from the small gains the Russians have made, pretty static in Syria as well. You know, there's, I think, a realistic question about how much 50 special operators can do, even among the most capable operators in the world. They will certainly make the Kurdish forces and the Arab forces in the region more effective, and to the degree they engage in more operations like we saw targeted against Abu Sayyaf to gain intelligence, also make the effort more effective. But it's unlikely, I think, in and of itself to move the needle very much. So we do have to keep an eye out to whether this is part of a continuing escalation. But I think the administration is responding both to the Russian assertiveness as well as to the static nature of the battlefield.
And I just want to be precise. You agree, you believe that the President should come to Congress and seek formal congressional authorization for this new phase in the war against ISIS?
Well, absolutely. And I should say not just for this new phase. Certainly the addition of these special operators makes it more imperative than ever, because we're going to now have more pilots and more people in harm's way. But this is something Congress should have taken up over a year ago when this conflict began and our military participation began. I don't think it's supported by the two pre-existing authorizations to use force, the one against Saddam Hussein's Iraq and the other in the wake of 9/11. And I think the administration is on very tenuous legal ground in relying on that as the basis for this and the war that's been going on for the last year.
Congressman Adam Schiff, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf.